I shall retrace my steps to cover up my tracks, to conceal my taste of treason, to detach you from me, and the hatred offered by a father's heart. Will always keep brothers apart. A tribe home, remember, downright rosy surprises. You stay on the roof. The stillness brings death and slowly springs feelings of cold politeness. To never melt into that kindness of your peace. You must have never tried. We say, one minute, we say weep until the weeping is done. We shall weep for another day. What binds us to our grief binds the sculptor to his clay. What binds us to our grief binds the sculptor to his clay. Most love, most gracious, with whips and strings and clumps, rings of yellow, and from time to time, trapped in reflections. Before there's no place, no home for us. This life, this life is mine. This life is yours. You only suffer as long as you wait. Like us, we let each other down. Choice into his black and red. A delicate memory is gone. No God, no wisdom, no marks this way. I never want to serve you. No more palace of flesh. Loneliness spreads out between our sheets. Our sacrifice is a moment, thrones of time. When we shall confident, sleep confident. What binds us to our roots, binds the sculptor to his clay. For us, binds us to our grief. Binds the sculptor to his clay. Deserted vacuum. Deserted
without wealth, without property, without a efficient tribal or office.
So the line in that song, what binds us to our grief binds the sculptor to his clay. And it's a nice poetic line to introduce the final rule number 12 of 12 rules for mad miracles of death and recovery. Bring back your story to help others. And I've prefaced it with a quote from Karl Marx. History calls those men the greatest who have ennobled themselves by working for the common good. Experience acclaims as happiest the man who has made the greatest number of people happy. So I'll read out the little section that I've got here. The world is in dire need of healers. Material needs are already more than satiated by the miracles of modern technology. And within a decade or two, all other jobs except the cultural and artistic ones, i.e. the psychological, spiritual ones, will be almost entirely obsolete and redundant. Those who have experienced the spiritual transformations, who have been lost and now are found, represent an enormous wellspring to slake the spiritual thirst of others, of those who also suffer, and lead them too towards the light. Your story and what you have learned, once you recover, is invaluable, often far more so than the petty qualifications so-called experts, who are often merely conformist parasites who have really never grappled with the true sources of human angst and woe, but merely parrot a therapeutic party line that keeps them in business, i.e., often isn't effective, but keeps the customers coming back, keeps the customers sick and dependent, looking outside of themselves for answers. The nature of beauty is conquest over adversity, order out of chaos. So you mustn't think that any miseries or negative patterns you've experienced in your life disqualify you from being a guide for others. On the contrary, they are the raw material, the chaos for which your life artistry that will equip you with the skills to teach and heal others. They are shade, the contrast necessary to draw out and fully allow the light to presence itself. The source for heroism, which is the true health, rather than mere clinical normality. The very notion of which discourages us and makes us feel more ill by its instinctive perversity and total absence of ambition and courage, of which we secretly know are demanded of us by our higher selves. What the world needs isn't more professional therapists. What the world needs is more real people. People who bear and bear the truth about themselves. That is, people who carry the truth and people who lay naked the truth about themselves. Who recognize the truth about the world we live in and aren't afraid to speak it. And who are themselves, simply by their own gobsmacking, unexpected existence, an authentic, undeniable testament to the potential for healing, and the ever graceful, amazing resilience of the human spirit, and almost any conditions, even the conditions of the Gilliam-esque, Kafkaesque modern day mental health services. Your story is unique to you, but at the same time carries universal significance and lessons that can be applied to countless others. By beginning to understand this overlap better and better, and how the soul of oneself, of us, fits with the soul of others, and society in general, as well as helping others, we also arrive at an infinitely deeper sense of our own real identity, our virtues, weaknesses, and idiosyncrasies, and our God-given mission in the universe. Once we become perfect according to our own nature and have done the rightful work upon ourselves, the natural teleology of ourselves in relation to society and the universe can finally manifest and give birth beyond itself, as it has always longed to do, without doing any harm to others, but was never able to due to its own self-sabotaging imperfections, perplexities, and pathologies, resulting from a consciousness divided between itself and the world. By the loathsome amour propre, which Rousseau long ago warned us about. Could anything be more important? Bring back your story to help others. So what I'm saying towards the end there is that first you heal yourself, within yourself, so that you feel fairly good and at least kind of like wholesome and in good order within yourself, and then you start to try to discover your teleology, your purpose in relation to society in general and other people. And these processes can be, somewhat interrelated, but on the other hand, you want to concentrate, firstly on working on yourself before you start just like thrusting yourself into society. Thinking you can make a positive difference. So, as we begin to, go out into the world and, strive to, fulfill some kind of mission in relation to society, that is a learning process too, and we discover more ourselves. We discover more about ourselves that way as well. So, um, unless you're experiencing your, role in relation to others as kind of a learning experience, and it's kind of like inspiring and stimulating new things within you, new feelings, etc., to manifest. Then you're probably not doing it right. That's a problem, and you need to work on that. And you may just need to go back and work more on yourself. So that you maybe begin to feel, a thirst for new experiences again. And learn how to be receptive to, the call of others and the call of the universe. And, there's nothing more therapeutic and, inspiring for people, healing for people, than to be with somebody who just is, simply, as I say here, they bear the truth about themselves. They, they carry it within them, at a level of insight, that other people perhaps don't lack. So I mean, they know who they are, and what they stand for, and and genuinely are committed to, compassion towards themselves and others. And then they also manifest it, and they bear it. They lay it bare. So, they just speak the truth about the world that we live in, which, other people are frightened to speak. Or they haven't managed to articulate yet because they're just too young and indoctrinated. Nothing is more of a relief and more healing than those things. What young people suffer from, at least if they're of any quality, if they're good people, what they suffer from is, all the lies that they've been fed and all the lies in society generally, and they're dying to, see the truth properly articulated and be allowed to, live in it. Without, being made to feel crazy or like they're a thorn in the side of everybody around them who just, is determined to keep their heads in the sand and lie to themselves, and they blame the person who, just wants to know the truth and wants to be honest. And if you are that honest person, you're made to feel like, a thorn in the side of everybody else, unfortunately. Whereas if you find the right group, the right people, it becomes the opposite. You become you become hugely hugely praised and rewarded for all your commitment to truth, and it feels great. So so much of what is called mental illness, or what people suffer from, is just being having this fortune of being around bad people, dishonest people, who make you suffer simply wanting to be yourself and wanting to be honest. They can swing around 180 degrees, so you're no longer the mentally ill one. Be like 1,000 light years ahead of everybody else, that you used to know. And like Stefan Molyneux talks about, he had a a very unpleasant upbringing, and he didn't get on with his parents, had an abusive mother, but he decided to separate himself from all that, and he tells other people to do the same. And well, as a result, he's the biggest philosopher on the internet, and he's considered a beacon of wisdom, with an enormous following of friends and allies. I'm not saying Stefan Molyneux is the best example in the world, but he's just somebody who springs to mind nowadays to kind of illustrate what I'm saying. If you have a disharmony between you and the people around you, then that can make you utterly miserable, or make them utterly miserable perhaps as well. When it's entirely due to a disharmony between you and your environment, and nothing incurable or ingrained in you that makes you unhappy, just disharmony. So just think, how much more, empowering it is, if you're somebody who's mentally ill or been labeled mentally ill, and you are struggling, imagine how much more, inspiring, empowering it is to have, people who have experienced the same conditions, or similar conditions and situations, and they don't patronize about them, but they come from the same place, and wear it on their sleeve with pride. And like Stefan Molyneux also says, he goes back down to the cave to help others towards the light. I mean, this is really the only authentic attitude. Therapists are just a priestly class who basically, get off on making you feel bad, deferring to them, their authority. And their business, relies on your sense of inferiority, It's not, of course, it's not that simple, black and white. I mean, there are good therapists, and therapists come from, they admit that they suffer from problems themselves, and they come from, amongst us, many of them. But it's something about the culture, right? That it's particularly if you take certain aspects of it, like psychiatry, psychiatrists, doctors, etc. But also, throughout to some extent, the culture is is more about like I said, it's more about looking to them, for knowledge and guidance, and with psychiatry, especially with doctors, and which is like a huge part of the profession, the whole system. There is a very, very, very heavy stigmatization of mental illness, and a sense that people who with mental illness are inferior. Very, very strong sense of that coming from all the doctors, all the psychiatrists themselves. So from the profession itself. Which is just not a very, it's not a healthy environment. It's not a psychologically healthy environment. If you feel inferior and you kind of like habituated psychologically to be deferent to other people, like therapists, psychiatrists, etc., then I mean, then you will tend to get some kind of like psychological payoff, let's say, or some kind of strange payoff by having their attention, etc. But which is not entirely healthy. It's like if you really worship somebody, you really look up to them, like a child does a parent, or if you really love somebody, say romantically, then you enjoy their attention, and you want more of it, and to a certain extent, it makes you feel happier, or at least you think it does. but at the same time, you also, you're also sort of literally a slave to this person. You're literally enslaved to them psychologically. And it's important really to strive to to become more spiritually self-sufficient and independent and not be enslaved to others. But it's all right for there to be some kind of perhaps inequality in knowledge and spirituality, and and a sense of confidence, etc. But you want it to be, you want this to be up front, to some extent, and not concealed, and and subtly, um, um, through an avowed means, to be reinforced, rather than genuinely empowering the suffering individual. Instead, the system, can be, and the relationship can be, simply to reinforce the sense of deference and inferiority. I mean, in my case, I literally, am superior to the psychiatrist. I know much more than him, about the very issues he's supposed to know about. And still, he's treating me like a complete animal and worthless, specimen. So this is how bad the problem is. I mean, you take, you can give a psychiatrist, like the greatest mind that ever existed, a total philosopher, and they will still treat them like an insect. And be totally, power tripping all over them, and and only want complete and utter, and blind deference. It, so I know I'm not making this up. This is first-hand experience I have of it, and so if they would do that with somebody like me, who's obviously very, vociferous and articulate in many ways, and has an underlying sense of his own worth, imagine how exploitative they could be with, just an ordinary, nervous and shy individual who has never really studied psychology or philosophy, and just a humble individual, trusting, who is naturally quite deferent anyway. I mean, the psychiatrist is just going to have this person eating out of their hand, forever and ever. And manipulating them in God knows what fashion. With probably very, very little will ever to actually empower them. Or treat them as equals. So it's important to recognize that your own struggle, if you're unhappy, if you've been unhappy at some point in your life, well, generally, if you overcome that, it'll teach you things. I mean, not everybody will, learn the right lessons from, their past and their experiences. Most people won't probably. So you have to do it the right way. Be honest, and genuinely honest. But generally, you may often, learn very, very interesting, important things, both about yourself and about misery in general. And it's important to be, for this, to be empowering, give you confidence, but at the same time, retain humility, and don't think what applies to you or necessary to apply to everybody else. But on the other hand, have some confidence that they can do apply to other people. But when people say things like, oh, I have bipolar, and I healed it such and such a way, and you have bipolar, and you just, I know how to treat you, I know what to do because I've had it myself. Well, this is fairly delusional, because in reality, these banners, bipolar, etc., and depression, schizophrenia, etc., they're not actually real. They don't actually identify, something tangible about human beings, about individuals. And in reality, human beings and their various states are much more individual than that. They're much more individual. So, you have to pay attention to the individuality of other human beings, rather than seeing them in terms of these very misleading labels. And just the ability to to relate to other people's suffering, and to have been there oneself, and then to overcome it, just to bear witness to that, around other people, can potentially be very, very empowering and inspiring. And the more in depth and detailed and nuanced a manner that manifests in, the greater the overlap between one's own experiences and the experiences of the person who one is trying to help. The potentially more powerful that is. Just making an emotional connection, a genuine emotional connection with someone, can potentially totally transform a person's life. just making a genuine, subtle, delicate emotional connection with somebody, for half an hour or so. Just one conversation. It can, particularly when somebody's young and they haven't experienced that kind of thing before, it can revolutionize their understanding and set them on a new course. In reality, it's kind of the most delicate, the delicate things, the most sensitive experiences, emotional experiences, which are genuinely healing. Which is the exact opposite of what the doctors deal in, which is some kind of brute chemical which has nothing to do with emotional experiences and sensitivity, and just rides roughshod over it and destroys the capacity for it in many respects. So it's pretty clear it's the complete opposite of genuine healing. Genuine healing is a meditative state, it's a highly attuned meditative state. And anything which draws attention away from that, distracts from it, and starts to bulldoze you and flood your system with chemicals, is extremely dangerous. Liable to drive people insane. It's more insane, I should say. So Rousseau's notion of amor propre, which I mentioned at the end, is to do with, as I understand it, it's about always kind of interpreting oneself in the light of how society sees you. Always casting a glance of your back to to see your kind of like how you weigh up with other people. Rather than just more interpreting yourself in your own light and allowing yourself to manifest as you are and be happy in your own existence. So when we are obsessed with meeting up to other people's expectations, well, this is just like a pre-enlightened state, which means we haven't really achieved fully proper self-acceptance, and therefore we're not going to be able to really help others accept themselves either. Instead, we're going to foist our own insecurities about living up to society's expectations onto other people, and try to look good through them more. um, most people, they're frightened to see themselves and see reality as actually is because they're afraid of what other people will think. You know, they're afraid of what they're supposed to think, and and the way they see things might not be the way that they're supposed to see them. So this creates a divided consciousness, which is extremely unhealthy and prevents, it sabotages our own happiness and prevents us from being, a blessing to others either. You have to, clearly accept in your own mind and come to terms with, the disparity between, what you're supposed to see and what is really out there, how the world really is. You have to somehow reconcile these two without compromising your the truth and your correct understanding, without compromising that and compromising your faith in that and your safety in that. In deference to how you're supposed to see things. And as I say, it's been said a long time ago, by people like Buckminster Fuller, that over 90% of the professions, etc., the jobs people do in society, they're totally redundant. They just basically, exist to take up people's time and distract them from, questioning authority, etc. And that, if it wasn't totally true in the past, it's more and more true. And with the advent of robotics and AI, it's just absolutely undeniable that the most valuable or the only valuable occupation is going to be enjoying yourself and conveying your own enjoyment and spirituality to other people. Yeah, robots and AI may be able to do this too a little bit, but human beings are going to have the advantage still on that. But there's going to be no need for human beings to slog away in any other kind of job, unless somebody wants them to, unless the powers that be want them to, or they're stupid enough to think they want to do it themselves or something. I don't know. So if you've suffered from a mental health crisis and you've come through it, and you dedicate yourself to really understanding it and becoming like an expert in this area, completely disregarding the normal respectable work in society, but just actually cultivating your own soul, in your relationship with God, your own soul and your relationship with God, then that is going to be the most, profitable, economically profitable occupation potentially, as well. Um, you know, they say, a rich man can't enter heaven, but if you're already in heaven, then why not become rich, afterwards, So, first you deal with your own inner issues, become a genuine healer of yourself and those around you, and if you want both, if you want, social rewards and riches as well, well, it's probably one of the few things that stands any chance of being profitable in the future, because AI and robots who have to do everything else. I mean, that there may be some other, potential for, human effort and work in something else, like well, I don't know, some kind of like working with the AI or the robots in some capacity, whereby you well, it depends what the greatest powers, in society decide. I mean, what these things would be used for. I mean, it's likely to be more psychological, because all material things will be able to be accomplished by robots, etc. So, it's difficult to see why there would be any point for any human being to be involved in that. But then, informational processes can be done by AI as well. But I mean, I guess if we're not engaging in therapy and mutual healing for our own enjoyment, I mean, one of the other obvious alternatives is, warfare. A kind of just warfare for our own enjoyment and sport. So we're still just, destroying one another instead of healing one another. To keep us entertained that way. But But just so you know, to make the point clear again, the more our material needs are met by robots, etc., the much more valuable, and the more we'll be able to focus society on the real, deeper emotional needs, which are far more important to human beings' happiness. And genuine love and beauty. So that is the obvious thing to focus on, if it wasn't always. So don't think you're lazy for not going out and getting a job at the supermarket as a supermarket cashier. Instead you're wasting time enjoying yourself. In fact, enjoying yourself is the most economically and just generally socially valuable thing you can do, because real value is emotional, spiritual, and the more we cultivate our own inner peace and bliss and enjoyment, the more we will have of that, and the more we'll be able to give to others.